Greetings. Today's show is called Better Late Than Never. I apologize. And let's get started. Today we're looking at 3 texts in Phaladipika. Let me show you the text. That will bring out the importance of 2 things. One is the full moon, or the brightness of the moon, and the other is the Navamsha, but not the Navamsha as a chart. So this is an interesting, finally you guys will see something important about the Navamsha that you have not probably heard of before. So let's take a look at it. I think this would be good, and I just have to get this on. Nope, this one. This should be good, yeah. All right. So the 11th text. This is now the 7th chapter, by the way. Shuddha manalopama bimba shobita shashi navangshe nalini priyasya yadikshitisho bahuhasti purna spashcha kendreshu napapayukta. The first line has like an extra 1 or 2 syllables in it, but maybe this kind of a format allows that, and I can't really spot the syllable. That would be a mistake. Any case, it's not difficult to translate. If the moon is brilliant, is full, okay, that is what we say, bimba. It's full, like a brilliant white lotus. Like shobita means is very bright. Obviously, if it's full, he's just being poetic. Mrinalopama, Shuddha Mrinalopama, a brilliant white lotus, like a brilliant white lotus. And in a Navamsha, Navamshe, Nalini Priyasya, if it's in a Navamsha that belongs to a lotus friend. So there's this poetry to help you remember the yoga. If the moon looks like it's a big circular white lotus and it's in a Navamsha that it belongs to the friend of the lotus, then it's going to be a good thing. What kind of a good thing? You will get Kshiti Isha, a king, an earth master. Bahuhasti Purna, who has a lot of elephants. So in other words, they're ruling a prosperous country. They're ruling a prosperous country. Shubhascha kendreshu napapayukta. There's one more consideration. Besides the moon being full and in the Navamsha of Lotus Friend, the chart also has to have, the chart has to have benefics in the Kendra and malefics not in the Kendra. Okay. So who's the Lotus Friend? Well, you can see already in my translation, the sun or the moon. So the lotus is open and closed on a daily basis. Many of them close up at night and open up when the sun comes out. But other types of lotuses do the opposite. They open up at night and they close up when the sun comes out. So both the sun and the moon are described as Nalini Priya, or other kind of words that mean the same exact thing. Lotus friend, the lotus is lover, etc. The one that makes lotuses happy and open up. So what does that mean in terms of a zodiac? The sun and the moon. So that would mean Cancer and Leo. So let me show you what he's talking about and what this means to Navamsha. What you guys are hopefully going to come away with today is that the Navamsha chart is the Navamsha chart, but there's more to the Navamsha than just the Navamsha chart. The Navamsha chart is called a varga. Varga means a collection of things. So the chart of the Navamsha is the collection of the amshas from throughout the zodiacs. You collect, how many will there be? And this is an interesting trivia question. How many times will you have Aries in the Navamsha? There's 108. You must have 9 of each. So you will collect all the 9 Aries, all the 9 Tauruses into one Taurus, all the 9 Geminis into one Gemini. And that's what the meaning of the word Varga is, collection. And then since you've also done this for the ascendant, then you can assemble a chart. That's what people are typically used to when they talk about the Navamsha. You're looking at a different chart. But guess what? That's the Varga of the Navamsha. That's the collection of the Navamshas. Actually, the Navamshas also just plain old exist in the zodiac separately. Let me give you visual aid. And then we can check and see if we find this yoga in it. I will probably just use my chart. Let's use somebody else's chart. Oh, how did I wind up here? This known people. Let's use Malcolm X. All right, now I can show you this screen. Just wait 1 second. Come on, Malcolm. Help us out. Here he is. Looking good. All right. There you can see, hopefully not too small. Malcolm X's chart. I want to show you what I mean about the Navamshas and the Amshas. This is the way you're used to thinking of vargas. You're used to thinking of the Amshas in terms of vargas. So, for example, come on, you can do it. Why is it spazzing out? Google Chrome has been spazzing out lately. All right, so you're used to thinking of, sorry for it's a bit misprinted somehow. Rashi and Navamsha are like this, like 2 different things. Right? But that's not really what the Navamsha is. This is the collection. What you see on the screen here in the bottom chart is the collection of all of his Navamshas. Let's just make a note of the various things that are going on, a couple of things. So, for example, there's Jupiter. This is interesting because I recently used him as an example for Jupiter in Capricorn. I think it was, anyway. So he's got Jupiter in Capricorn. It's retrograde, if I remember correctly. And then he's got, in Navamsa, Jupiter is in Cancer. That is very interesting because in one, it's debilitated and the other is exalted. And let's also look at Mars. Okay. Mars in one is also debilitated in the main one. It's debilitated. So it's also setting up a Nichbang debilitation modification with Jupiter because the 2 debilitate planets are aspecting each other. So Mars is in Cancer in one, and in the other it's in Leo. In the Navamsha it's in Leo, but in both cases it's in the 7th house. So let's just use those two examples. Jupiter in Cancer Navamsha, Mars in, oh boy, your brain might be about to explode when you realize what it means that Jupiter is in Cancer Navamsha, but Mars is in Cancer Rashi. And this is one of the most important and unknown techniques in the current astrological world, and that I just hinted at what it is. The fact that his Mars is in Cancer and his Jupiter is in Cancer Navamsha is important. All right, let me show you what the amsha is, really. This is what it really is. Let's find Aries. This is what the Navamsha actually literally is. You see on the outside ring? Here's Aries. And on the outside ring, you have 9 parts of Aries. 9 equal parts beginning with Aries. And then it continues. So we saw his Jupiter in Cancer, right? In the Cancer of the Navamsha. So when you go around the whole wheel, you wind up with 108 of those divisions, 9 times 12, 9 per 12. So you're going to have, I believe, we could fact check it, but I think you should have, 9 of each sign. So there's 9 cancers, 9 Navamsha cancers in the zodiac. There's 1 regular Cancer, there's 9 Navamsha cancers. Jupiter's in one of them, right? Let's see which one. You see, here's his Jupiter. Now you see that, look on the outside of the edge, and you see that it's in Cancer. That's why. When you look at the Navamsha chart, I should actually have them on separate pages. That's why when you look at the Navamsha chart, let me do that. You see in this Navamsha chart, Jupiter's in Cancer. Make sure this is working. Yes. And here's where it actually is. You see it's in Cancer. It happens to be in the Cancer of Capricorn, not in the Cancer over here in the 12th, not in the Sagittarius Cancer. It's in the Capricorn Cancer. But as far as this is concerned, we don't care. We don't know. We don't know which Cancer Jupiter is in, because we've taken a varga of all of the amshas of Cancer and combined them. So, for example, you see these two where there's conjunctions. Moon and Ketu are both in Sagittarian Cancer. What is Cancer in his chart? What is Sagittarius in his chart? Sagittarius is his 12th house. There's Ketu there. He's starting to peek into the way that the Navamsha really, really works. So let's look at that. How do we get Moon and Ketu to be together in his Navamsha? And also Sun and Saturn. Sun and Saturn for Malcolm. So they're both supposed to be in Sagittarius. Okay, here's his Ketu. Let's check it out. It's in Aquarius, Sagittarius. It's in the Sagittarius Navamsha of Aquarius. And let's find his moon. Ooh, it's right at the beginning of Taurus. And it's right at the end of Sagittarius. Where is it? Is it right at the end of Aries? Because this is a little sloppy. These are just graphics that are rotated by a web browser. So with a moon like this, let's check. It's at the absolute end of Aquarius. Actually, we could have figured that out by the fact that it's in Sagittarius Navamsha. So this moon is also crossing into exaltation. All right, so to stay on the topic, here's the moon. Here it's in Sagittarius, barely. Look, by the way, this is another important point. It's at the end of the Sagittarius Navamsha. It's not at the beginning of the Sagittarius Navamsha. So it is towards the it's towards the end of Sagittarius, which means its Navamsha position is towards 30 degrees of Sagittarius in the Navamsha as well. This is where the people from Dr. Pi, Cosmic Insights, where they get the idea that you can get nakshatras in the amshas. Because since you have a degree, now you can say Jupiter is at not just at 30 degrees of the Rashi chart. 30 degrees of Aries means that it's about 29.5 degrees of Sagittarius Navamsha. So 29.5 degrees of Sagittarius Navamsha is X nakshatra. So in your Navamsha, you have your moon, although it's in Ashwini, it's actually in X nakshatra. So that's a interesting idea, but the reason why I don't accept it as having validity is because nakshatras are completely separate from the Rashis. They're a different matrix of space. But if you say, also, I think there's even a chart I think there's even a quote in one of the astrologers, in one of the classic texts, that we shouldn't go into infinite regress. Once you get to the Navamsha, what are you going to do? Further divide it? You could, theoretically, but what's the point? But anyway, the reason why I'm saying it is important is because you have 20. The fact that you can know the degree of the Navamsha is important, not so that you can further subdivide it. When we can't see molecules, what's the point of dealing with subatomic particles? But because you can now line it up. Remember I said it's important that his Mars is in Cancer and his Jupiter is in Cancer Navamsha. What's going to really show you how important that is what is the degree of his Mars in Cancer and what is the degree of his Jupiter in Cancer Navamsha. How close are they to lining up? All right. We're getting a little bit riffing. We're really riffing it today. But anyway, so you see, his moon is in the Sagittarius. This is so hard for me because dealing with nouns is really difficult. His moon is in the Sagittarius Navamsha of Aries. And his Ketu is in the Sagittarius Navamsha of Aquarius. See? That's why when you do vargas of everything, you see the moon and Ketu get together. You'll do the same thing for Saturn and the Sun. If you find the Sun over here, it's in Virgo of Taurus. And if you find Saturn, it's just at the end of Virgo Navamsha of Scorpio. They're opposite to each other, basically. But when they go into Navamsha, they both get conjoined. So the Navamsha really shows you some very interesting patterns that are non-aspectual patterns. Okay, that's what the Navamsha Varga is. Now, this is the Navamsha Varga. Everybody thinks this is important, and this is the way that you look at a Navamsha. Sure, this is one of the ways that you look at a Navamsha, and here you can look at a Saptamsha, and so forth. And that's okay, because you see, you can have Navamsha houses like this. That's the importance of this, of the Varga. The importance of the Varga is that it gives a house structure to the Amsha. How do you get the house structure? Look what sign is the first in this Navamsha. It's Aquarius. Why? Did we pick it out of thin air? No, because look, the ascendant is in the Aquarius portion of Capricorn. So the ascendant has the Navamsha of Aquarius. That's why when you make the Varga, you make Aquarius the first house, and then all the signs take the order from there. They have an order, natural order. So Mercury now all of a sudden is quite important because it was in the Varga, that it's in the Navamsha that is in the first house. Right, so these are some of the things. But what's really important, or what's equally important as using the Varga system, is the system thing that nobody thinks about, is the independent of the Vargas. Independent of the Vargas, for example, the only way that this really survives is people looking for Vargotama. And furthermore, the real magic is how the Navamsha signs match the Rashi signs, how you overlay things. Let's take a look at his Jupiter, for example. It would be, estimate 25 degrees-ish of Cancer. So his Jupiter is actually somewhere. Okay, I don't know if you can see my mouse pointer. His Mars is at an early degree of Cancer, and his Jupiter is over here, kind of at a late degree. So it's not an exact match, but they're both together in the one house. In some cases, you find things that are exact matches. It's very powerful. Yes, this is a lot of new information. So now let's go back to this and see what he's saying again. Phaladipika said, if the moon is full like a brilliant white lotus, oh, that's so easy. And also in a Navamsha belonging to a lotus friend. While the Kendra are occupied by benefics and no malefics, and it indicates a king endowed with many resources. So that means this. That means that the moon has to be, it had to be way back here. I wish you could see the pointer. It had to be way back, about 15 degrees back further into Aries. Then it would get to be in either Cancer or Leo. Navamsha. Of course, it's not anywhere near full. It's almost more like it's near moon. It's near new. In fact, it would almost be the opposite, where the sun is close and moon are close to being new. And if the moon was there, the next day it would also be in the lotus friend. Navamshas, which is Leo and Cancer. So to get it in this chart, to get it like at the time of the year when the sun is at the end of Taurus, you need to have a moon that's at the end, near the end of Scorpio, the opposite sign. That's how it gets to be full, to be opposite from the sun. And then you have to find Cancer, Leo, Navamshas in that area. So you get to the best one would be the one in Sagittarius. It's the closest to full. You can see it currently. It's at the beginning of Jeshta, or end of Jeshta, or beginning of Jeshta. And the other one is at the very beginning of Scorpio. That's how you get the condition of the moon being full and in the amsha of the lotus friend. And then in addition, you want only benefics. So any questions? You want only benefics in the Kendras and no malefics? That part's simple. Ronaldo, benefics in Kendra, malefics not in Kendra. Is it about D1 or D9 or both? See, it's definitely not about D9. He's not talking about, you're thinking, oh, look. There's a benefic. There's two benefics in the Kendra, and there's one malefic in the Kendra, the Navamsha. Just remember that much of the time, when classical astrologers deal with amshas, they don't deal with vargas. There's a difference between an amsha and a varga. The varga is a collection of amshas. There's no houses in the amshas. There's houses in the vargas. So he's not. The focus of this technique has nothing to do with the varga. It's an amsha, so it's this. But still, you have Mars there. chart is it? Okay. All right, let's look at the next one. Nichari varga rahitar vihagais tribistu. Swamshopagair balayutai shubhatrishti jushtai. Gokshira shanka Tavalo Mrigalansh Chalascha Sadyasya Janmani Chapumi Patir Jitari. If the moon is full, like milk or conch shell, and 3 planets are in their own Navamsha, aspected by benefics, and not in full or enemy signs, a king who conquers enemies should be born. So I can't do the I can't illustrate this to you with the usual chart that we use. I would have had to prepare a wheel. Sorry, thank you. So, let me read it one more time then. Nichari varga rahitar vihagais tribistu swam so pagar balayatai shubhatrishti jushta. Gokshira shanka davalo mrigalanchanascha Syadyasya janmani chabumi patir jitari. If the moon is full, like milk or a conch shell, and 3 planets are in their own Navamsha aspected by benefics, and not in full or enemy signs, a king who conquers enemies should be born. Let's take a look. We want to know, what does it mean that planets in their own Navamsha, but not in full or enemy signs? Because if I'm in my own Navamsha, obviously I'm not in a full or an enemy sign, right? I'm in my own sign. Wrong, because the Navamshas are signs within signs. So there is a Leo within Libra. Maybe let's check and see. There's probably a Leo within Libra, not necessarily because there's only 9 signs per sign, 9 Navamshas per sign. If there's a Leo within Libra, then the sun could be in its own Navamsha, but in a debilitated sign. So let's look. So let's take Mars, for example. You could put Mars here in Scorpio, in the Scorpio Navamsha, and then it becomes one of the 3 planets that you want to have in this condition. Let's say in Sagittarius, you could put Mars in Aries or Scorpio, and then it would be in its own sign. Can it be exalted, or it's just their own? It's just their own. And since Mars is friendly with Jupiter, it's not going to be an enemy sign. It's not the debilitation sign. Let's look at Capricorn. You could put Mars in Aries, and then it would be not in an enemy sign or a debilitated sign because it's exalted sign and it's in its own Navamsha. Let's look in Aquarius. You could put Mars really nowhere because it's in an enemy sign now. So it doesn't matter that there's an Aries and a Scorpio amsha in here. In Pisces, you could put it in the Scorpio segment because Mars is friendly with Pisces, and the requirement is you'll be in your own amsha while not in an enemy or a debilitated rashi. Here in Aries, Mars would be great in the Aries Navamsha or the Scorpio Navamsha. In Taurus, it's not really great because they're enemies. So even though there's an Aries Navamsha in it, it's not the best Aries Navamsha. So look, you're just used to looking at this. You know? You're just used to looking at the Navamsha and saying, okay, Mars is in, what do you call it? Mars is in Leo. And that's the end of the story. But there's a great difference between Mars in the Leo segment of Cancer or Mars in the Leo segment of Capricorn, or what? That's why you really, if you have a system like this where you can draw it on one wheel, that's nice. If you don't, then that's why they do these charts side by side. So you can see, okay, this Mars is in the Leo segment of Cancer. You can see literally on the screen right now, right? Unless I never switched it. So he's saying, let's get a planet to be in its own Navamsha and while it's not in a debilitated or enemy main sign. And let's try to get 3 of those. But actually, he gives another requirement. He says, let's get this planet to be in its own Navamsha while it's not debilitated or inimical, and have it be aspected by a benefic planet. That is what he said, right? Aspected by benefics. By a benefic. It doesn't have to be benefics. Shubhadrishti Jushtai. It's not multiple benefics. They're not required. Okay, that's simple, right? If you have 3 of those, 3 such conditions, 3 planets in their own Navamsha, not debilitated or inimical, aspected by benefics, you got yourself a Jitari Bhumipati, a king who conquers enemies. But the title of the session today is The Power of the Full Moon. Both of these yogas that we looked at so far have these situations, like let the Kendras be full of benefics and then have no malefics, and let there be 3 planets in their own Navamshas, etc. But the key to both of them is while the moon is full. The full moon is like an ascendant. The moon is like an ascendant. The condition of the moon is almost as important as the condition of the ascendant. And so one of the things that makes the moon very good is to be very full, to be very bright. Very good in the sense of having the ability to be kingly, be commanding, be dominant. But as long as you don't put it in certain places, because it is female, so you don't really put it in the first house. Remember, we had another yoga about that. All right, any questions so far? There's one more to look at. You guys are not catching this. Yeah, Malcolm's Mars, it's in this interesting situation. Mridanga Madhu. Aspected by benefics in the D9 or the D1, isn't it? It's exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, why do you think you must have come in late? D1, D9. No, this is what are we looking at? This is the varga of the Navamsha. That is not the only way that the Navamsha exists. Right? So here's his Mars. It's not meeting any of these conditions. It's not meeting the condition of not being debilitated. It's not meeting the condition of getting any benefics aspects. You know how you can tell? You see those color blurs? Those are the aspects. So the yellow blur is Jupiter's aspect. There's no pink blur. You can't even see it. That's Venus's aspect. And the green blur is Mercury's aspect. So it's really, really getting light aspect from Jupiter and Mercury, and mostly it's getting aspect from Saturn. So it's not meeting that, nor is it in its own Navamsha. Let's try to find another planet that is. Does he have a planet in his own Navamsha? It would be easier to look at this. Nope. He does not have one. It's not that this says anything about the use or disuse of aspects in Vargas, but what this is saying is you guys aren't used to thinking of using amshas as a part separate from their varga. You guys aren't used to knowing that there's a difference between an amsha and a varga. There's a difference between a Navamsha and a Navamsha varga. So just to reiterate, you see these little slices on the outside of the wheel, all these different zodiac signs, those are the Navamshas. So even on the screen right now, I can find 2 Cancers and 2 Leos and 2 Virgos and 2 Libras and 2 Scorpios and 2 Geminis on the screen right now. What's a Varga? Take both of those and put them together. Varga means to collect. So actually, there's going to be 9 of them in total. So we're going to take all 9 of each one and collect them together. That's a Varga. You guys are only used to thinking of the Navamsha in terms of the Varga, where they're all collected into one place and it looks like that. And you're not used to thinking of the Navamsha looking like this. But a lot of the techniques and systems that Phaladipika is using, that the classical people used, use the Varga use the Amsha like this. So when he's saying Mars should be in his own sign and not debilitated, of course, duh. No, he means the Rashi should not be debilitation or inimical, and Mars should have a benefic aspect and should be in its own Navamsha. I mean, I might show you some interesting things. It's a bit of a pain, though. You know how you can, let me just tell you this for the people that are very industrious. You know how you can do bi-wheels of people? You know, you do bi-wheels of people, like for example, for synastry, compatibility. Maybe you could try doing a bi-wheel of a varga to the Rashi and see what happens. That's the hint. Do Navamsha Lords of Planets in the D1 hold significance the way that full sign lords do? Not the same extent, but yes, they are important. And you've seen, I think we may have seen yogas already that talk about the importance of those lords. If a big planet like Jupiter or Saturn that is debilitated in D1 and exalted in D9, how would you interpret that? Yeah, this person is unusual. There's some way some people will think this person is immoral. Some people will think this person is the essence of moral. Look at Malcolm X. He's trying to embrace aggression, Mars debilitated, yet also in a strong Navamsha. He's trying to embrace aggression and force and demand, stridency, threat of violence as a means to getting justice, equality, etc. So how do you see a better illustration of Jupiter, which is both debilitated and exalted at the same time? By the way, also his Jupiter is retrograde. Okay, let's have a look at the third text. Kumuda Gahana Bandun Shreshtamam Samprapannam Yadi Bala Samupeta Yadi Bala Samupeta Pashyati Vyomachari. Udaya Bhavana Sangsta Papa Sangyo Nachaivam Bhavati Manujan Nata Sarvabhoma Sudeha. If the moon is Vargotam and aspected by a strong planet, while no malefics are in the first house, a beautiful king of the entire earth manifests. Kumudagahana Bandhu means the friend of the lotuses. Remember from the first thing? So this is also kind of confirmation that in the first yoga we looked at, the Navamsha can either be Leo or Cancer. Friend of the lotus, I've seen the translations of Phaladipika, they just say that it's Leo. Because they think the sun is the friend of the lotus, but the moon is the friend of the lotus. Some lotuses open at night. And so here he's directly calling the moon Kumunda Gahana Bandhu, addressing the moon as the friend of the lotus. Shreshta Amsa is another way of saying Varga Uttama, Varga Amsha, Amsha Uttama. If the friend of the moon is in the best Amsha, which means the same Amsha as the sign, Prapannam, if it's gone there, Kumudagahana Bandhum Shreshta Amsam Prapanam Yadi Balasamupeta Pashyati Vyomachari. Vyomachari is a planet. It's a very cool way of saying planet. Vyomachari means sky. Sky mover? Skywalker. Skywalker. Vyomachari. Luke Skywalker. Vyomachari. Yadi Bala. So planets are the Skywalkers. And if a planet which has bala, or strength, can pashyati, can see it, which means aspect it. If the moon is Vargotama and aspected by a strong planet, Udaya Bhavana, and the first house, the house of the ascendant, the house of Udaya, the house of the ascendant, Samstapapa Sangyo Nachaiva. It's not knowing any malefics. It's not with any malefics. There are no malefics in the first house. If the moon is Vargotama and aspected by a strong planet, and there are no malefics in the first house, then you get Sudeha, a nice body. You get beauty. The moon is super important for the beauty, the physical beauty of the body. And so is the first house. So what is he saying? Get the moon to be Vargotama, aspected by a strong planet, and get no malefics in the first house. You got yourself a very handsome, lovely, beautiful person. Then also because the moon is Vargotama, because it's influenced by a strong planet, I don't know. I think that this yoga is missing something, really, to make it into a king. I could see how this yoga would make it into a beautiful person. But I think there's a couple, maybe it's a short on a little bit of the conditions that would make a person a king. Oh, Vyomachari. But he's saying, yeah, you'll get Manujanata. Manujanata means a leader of people. Or it could mean like a husband person. But then he says Sarvabhoma. So Sarvabhoma means the whole earth. So it's like a husband of the whole earth. A beautiful husband of the whole earth. So there's different ways to get kings. And that's also illustrated in the different yogas that produce them. We already encountered this by the one yoga that produced the king via Mars and Saturn, and this guy was the one that was feared from a distance. So in today's 3, we looked at yogas where the moon is quite important. But these are not producing the kings that are very manly, macho, warlike, or weapon-oriented. These are going to produce kings that are likable, lovable, affectionate, and attractive. Okay, any questions? Any last questions? Komodo says, since there are many different amsha, does Vargotama only count for Navamsha or is it any amsha? It could be any amsha, but if it's not specified as some other amsha, then it's the Navamsha. Because also, and the same thing goes in general for just the term amsha. If a person just says amsha, they mean the Navamsha. If they want to mean a different amsha, they'll have to specify saptamsha or something. This is just the way. This is just the way that language works. When you use, you know how language works. There's nouns, and nouns get adjectives affixed to them to modify them. But when you're using the adjective noun pair, that's the most common one. You can shorten it and drop the adjective. I can't think of a simple example anymore, but there's plenty of examples. Like refrigerator. I don't know why this popped into my head. Technically, it's not it's a refrigerator of food. But you don't have to say a food refrigerator. It's just the refrigerator that everybody is familiar with. But if you would have a refrigerator that's for something else, you would have to say a petri dish refrigerator or something to specify that it's not a food refrigerator. So in the same way, the amsha is mainly the Navamsha. It's mainly the Navamsha. Therefore, whenever you say amsha or vargotama or shreshtamsha, whatever, it means the Navamsha. If the person, it can mean a different amsha, but the person who's talking will say that this is not the usual amsha, this is a different amsha. Skywalker is Vyomachari, and that's what planets are called, because they move in the sky. But also the 10th house is called Vyomastana. So I was just wondering, because this third condition seems like it's lacking some, it's just showing me a beautiful person, but it's lacking the king element. It could actually, Vyomachari might mean to be in the 10th house, if the moon is in this condition in the 10th house, or if it's receiving a aspect from a planet from the 10th house. It's kind of a stretch. Mridangambadu says, I understand there's 108 Navamshas. 0 degrees through 3 degrees, 20 minutes of Aries is the Aries Navamsha. 20 degrees through 20 minutes of Aquarius is the Aries Navamsha. I don't understand how a planet can be in multiple Navamshas. Nobody said it was in multiple Navamshas. Right? Did I say that the planet is in multiple Navamshas? What the Varga does is Varga is the collection of the multiples. So, for example, you identified that there's an Aries in Aries and there's an Aries in Aquarius. There's an Aries Amsha in Aries and there's an Aries Amsha in Aquarius. If you make a Varga of the Amshas, Varga means collect. If you make a collection of those, you're going to merge the Aries that's in Aries, the Aries Amsha that's in Aries, with the Aries Amsha that's in Aquarius. So if you have Jupiter in Aquarius, Aries, Amsha of Aquarius, and you have Saturn in, what was the other one you said? In the Aries Amsha of Aries, then when you make the collection, then Jupiter and Saturn will conjoin in that Varga. There is a planet cannot be in multiple Navamshas. Have you ever heard about the? Thank you. Have you ever heard about the 64th Navamsha? Sure, that's basically what they're doing is correlating to the 8th house. So it's going to be be the amsha, which contains the cusp of the eighth house. Good one, Rebecca. Eddie. Anything else? All right. So I will call it a day. Thank you very much for joining me.